Hi friends, today we are going to discuss the following topics. So pause for a second and check the questions, and at the end of the video you should be having the answers for these questions. So the first topic we are going to discuss is related to the question, do you think MGNREGA is an effective poverty alleviation program, especially in the context of COVID-19 induced economic crisis? There are many articles coming related to MGNREGA because many experts think in the time of unemployment due to COVID induced economic slowdown, this can provide some money into the hands of the poor people. So that is the context. So for example, in May 2020 itself, that means last month, 2.19 crore households have demanded for work through the act. So it is the highest demand in the last 8 years for 1 month. Within 1 month, to receive such high number of applicants for the MGNREGA work is highest in last 8 years. So in this context, there can be a question, how effective is MGNREGA for alleviating the poverty? Okay. So in this context, you have to be very objective. You should provide, for all of your arguments, you should provide data, examples or reports, something like that. So the first thing is World Bank World Bank earlier, first when it was induced, when it was introduced, in around 2009, though it was introduced little earlier, but it takes some time to evaluate the effectiveness of MGNREGA. So World Development Report is released by World Bank. In that, it has initially commented MGNREGA as policy barrier hurting the economic development and poverty alleviation. But they themselves have changed their stand in 2014 in the World Development Report, and they said that it is an innovative example to promote financial inclusion. That shows that really MGNREGA, irrespective of which party has introduced it, it has really addressed the concerns of the poor to some extent at least. The example is World Bank itself has changed its stance from the hostile stand to favorable stand. Okay. Second, the scheme had provided safety net. It has helped to spread awareness about rights, that is right to work and thereby right to food, and promoted dignity. This sentence was picked up from the World Development Report of 2014. And not only that, it also said that it is an illustrative example. MGNREGA is an illustrative example how good governance and social mobilization can go hand in hand. So good governance is meant to address the concerns of the citizens at the grassroots level. So that is how good governance is there. Good governance demands citizen participation. So when they themselves are coming forward and expressing interest for the work, that shows good governance principle in the form of citizen participation. Social mobilization means people are once they are made aware of that they have right to work, many NGOs, many experts like Amartya Sen and John Rees, these people have mobilized the people to claim their right to work. So that is how the term social mobilization will have relevance here. So good governance and social mobilization together went hand in hand. Government has introduced right policies. Accordingly, people have responded. So that is what the MGNREGA demonstrates here. It has provided employment to 1 in every 6 families in India. That shows the effectiveness of the MGNREGA. There are some data here which are little bit old data. These data have been collected by me when I was preparing. But if you don't have any latest data, you can quote this. But if you have latest data, I request you to update I request you to replace these data with that new data. Okay. MGNREGA flagship scheme evaluation. As per National Council of Applied Economic Research, from 2004-5 to 2011-12, it has reduced poverty by 32%. And it has reduced poverty among SC and ST communities by 38% and 28% respectively. In that, 57% of jobs went to women. So women empowerment also it has facilitated. And 1/3 of jobs in among the jobs to women, among the 57% of jobs to women, one third of jobs went to SC and ST. So it has really created a hope for the poor people. Other than the main aim is alleviation of poverty. Other than alleviation of poverty, the following things have also occurred because of MGNREGA. It is a stellar example of rural development, acted as a safety net. Moreover, in 2016, you know that there was demonetization. In that year, Economic Survey has commended MGNREGA, saying that during demonetization period, it has provided, MGNREGA acted as a safety net. So whenever there is a crisis, MGNREGA came to rescue of the poor people. So there were hike in rural wages because of MGNREGA, because now agricultural labor will have bargaining power. They can claim the landlord and the owner of the land, saying that if I work in MGNREGA, I will get this much money. If I have to work with you, I need more money. So in that way they can bargain. So the bargaining power resulted in hike in rural wages, and it has revitalized the rural labor market, and it has reduced distress migration. That is distressed migration, it has reduced. Okay. Not only that, it has created improvement in water related assets, increased the number of days, because of, since you have created water related assets. What do I mean by water related assets? Water ponds, water tanks. So storage infrastructure for water has been improved, because of which the number of days water is available in a year has increased. Now, as a result, the area under cultivation is also increased, because of which the agriculture labor will increase. The employment opportunities will increase, migration will reduce, and increased quantity of water available for irrigation. So crop will also be very good. Okay, so these are the main benefits, but there are also some disadvantages which were mentioned. One of such disadvantages is MGNREGA is not leveraged with the skill development, because of which people who were earlier involved in the traditional industries, since those traditional industries products has no demand in the market, even those people are coming to MGNREGA work, because of which their skill is lost. And moreover, that industry is going to, that weaving industry, the textile industry will have repercussions in terms of the production and output. So that is the main criticism with respect to MGNREGA effectiveness. That is one criticism. The second criticism is the money is not given at the right time. There were delay in payments. It has been reported in many places. Not only that, there are some places in Jharkhand area where even the people have the willingness to work, but the government is not able to provide them the work for full 100 days. Actually, as per the scheme, it is the right for the rural unemployed people to demand at least 100 days of working, but the government is not able to provide them 100 days of working. For example, it has happened in Jharkhand. Okay, so I have told you many benefits and some criticism against MGNREGA. So if MGNREGA can correct, implementers can correct those two drawbacks, then it is definitely required for the Indian context with respect to alleviating the poverty. Then the next topic is related to statutory and regulatory authorities. Okay, here statutory and regulatory authorities, I have two questions. One is NHRC fulfilling its mandate as a human rights watchdog? Justify your stand with examples. The other one is, to what extent market regulatory authorities are effective in curbing the malpractices in Indian context? Now we will be able to find the answers for those two. I have picked up these two. Whatever I have discussed till now about MGNREGA, I have collected many articles from the newspaper. In that context, I have discussed that topic. Whereas this topic today, today there were 2 reports on Hindu paper related to new National Human Rights Commission, and last few days also I have been seeing many news reports related to new National Human Rights Commission. So I thought it is relevant to discuss in this context National Human Rights Commission mandate and its effectiveness. So I request you to go through the National Human Rights Commission and State Human Rights Commission chapter in the Lakshmikant Polity book. Check the role and responsibilities of the NHRC and evaluate whatever I am discussing here in by keeping that framework. So once you read role and responsibilities, once I discuss examples here, do the mapping, and thereby your answer will be comprehensive and you will get more marks in the exam. And do remember that in the exam, don't write one thing at depth, write more points, but in a way that the intent of what you wanted to convey is understood by the examiner. Write more points, don't discuss one point at great length. So these NHRC has issued a notice to UP government on the charges of it. 2 pregnant women were denied the treatment in the hospital. This is this was taken. This NHRC has taken sumo to cognizance of media reports. So NHRC will take the cases in 2 ways. One is it will take sumo to cognizance based on the what is reported in the media. Second thing is if I file a complaint, or if some NGO file a complaint, or you file a complaint, so if someone complains, they will take up that case also. So these are the 2 main ways they take up the cases. So this is an example. NHRC notice to UP on denial of treatment to 2 pregnant women is an example of sumo to cognizance. Why I am particularly is these days questions are becoming very specific, so they may ask you the you may be required to quote examples for the particular case. So for sumo to cognizance, you can quote that example. Whereas the second example is NHRC seeks report on deaths by police action. So a body called Commonwealth Human Rights Initiative has filed a complaint to NHRC saying that from March 15th to April 30, many people have died as part of police action, either by lathi charge or while they are in police custody, they have died, some 15 people. So on this basis, the Commonwealth Human Rights Initiative has filed a complaint. Then National Human Rights Commission has asked for taking that into account, NHRC has asked for action taken reports from the authorities of 7 states. For example, it has sent notices to district magistrates and police chiefs and asked it has given some time to submit their reports. I think by July 15 they are required to submit their reports. So but you have to follow up this. I will follow up this news and tell you whether it has resulted in something substantial. Then only we can say NHRC is effective. Otherwise, just by issuing notices without following up of the action, we cannot say that NHRC is very effective. Maybe it is doing its duty, but ultimately it should result in justice to the victims. Otherwise, NHRC remains a paper tiger. Okay, we will follow up this news and I will update you on the effectiveness. For now, you just gather these points for your thing. I mean, to write few points whether NHRC is acting as per its mandate. Definitely it is acting for its mandate, but ultimately whether the mandate is resulting in some positive outcome for the victims, that we will evaluate in the future days. Okay. Next, there is one more question I have introduced. How far market regulate? Okay, let us go back to that question once. To what extent market regulatory authorities are effective in curbing the malpractices in Indian context? So I have broadened the question. I told market regulatory authorities. I did not mention which market. It can be financial market, it can be agricultural market, it can be some other market. So there you have a scope to expand your answer in multiple dimensions, but today I am discussing here only with respect to Competition Commission of India. So when question comes, please observe the question carefully and see whether you can interpret the question in a very broad way. When you can interpret the question in a very broad way, you have to take care that what everyone writes, you should write it in the first, and your broad interpretation should come next. You should not write something very vague in the first and very important thing in the last. So that may hurt your chances of getting more marks. Okay, please remember that. And now this thing, Google faces antitrust case in India. This news is not related to today. I have picked up it from the last month news, because since I am already discussing statutory bodies, I thought it is relevant to bring that news here. So I am just making clear that though it may appear for you guys like I am not covering all the news in newspaper, but I am covering all the news, but I am covering them in the right context, because there is no point in discussing about a story which is in development. After few days, the news will be developed to good extent that we will get more points. So don't worry that you will miss out on something. I will not miss any news. I will bring all the news which is relevant to exam and present before you. Okay, have that faith on me. Thank you. Google faces antitrust case in India. Oh, so what is this exactly? The news is the complainant says that Google Google is promoting payments app in its Android store. You all know that we download apps from Google Play Store. The complainant is saying that Google Play Store is promoting Google Pay more than the other payment apps. So he is saying that it is anti-competitive practice. So that is why he went to Competition Commission of India, which is a statutory body, and it is also a market watchdog with respect to encouraging the competitive practices and discouraging the anti-competitive practices. The complaint alleging that Google, okay, fine, that is the main thing. The news item has also mentioned about in this news item there were also two earlier instances where Google faced similar antitrust cases in India. Earlier, Competition Commission of India has fined Google with $21 billion USD for search bias related charges. So in the search, if they promote only certain kind of ads, certain kinds of information intentionally, irrespective of the effectiveness, if intentionally they are promoting some content, that will be antithetical to level playing field. So that is why someone has filed a case in CCI. CCI has fined Google $21 billion, but Google has upheld against it again. That is yet to be decided upon. Second thing, CCI is also probing the charges against Google for reducing the ability of smartphone manufacturers to opt for alternate versions of Android operating system. You all know that many of the smartphone manufacturers, for example MI and Samsung, they also use the Android variant only. So by using Android, Google will get some revenue from the Samsung and MI because of the ads and because of the apps which are promoted as part of Android Play Store. So all these things will be giving the money to the Google. Around the revenue is around hundreds of billion dollars. But some people are complaining that Google is forcing the smartphone manufacturers like Samsung and MI to take up only certain versions of Android. So that is curbing their freedom, which is again creating distortions in the market. You have to quote these two examples in the exam. Whenever you have a question related to CCI or even Market Regulatory Authority. So Competition Commission of India is established under Competition Act, and hence it is a statutory body. Also, it is the market watchdog to ensure competitiveness. It has one more example if you want. It will also looks into the acquisitions and mergers also. Those things will also go in front of the CCI. Only after its approval the acquisition will be affected. For example, you know that Flipkart has been acquired by Walmart. When Walmart wanted to acquire Flipkart, the application has been filed in front of the Competition Commission of India. Then once CCI has approved it, then the acquisition has been affected. Okay, these are the things we have discussed till now. And finally, there is one more question which we wanted to discuss. To what extent monetization of deficit is an effective way to revive the Indian economy from the pandemic-induced slowdown? So you all know that many people are writing articles in the paper saying that the fiscal package announced by the government is not very effective. They are saying 20 trillion rupees they are inducing, but the point is that 20 trillion rupees is not direct money dispersed into the hands of the people. It, though the government claimed that 20 trillion is equivalent to 10% of the GDP, but in actuality only 1% of the GDP is going directly into the people's hands. So many people are criticizing it is not creating the adequate demand in the societies by which the economy can be revived. But this article says that the government is in a way it is doing right only because the already you might have followed the news. Moody, which is a rating agency, has downgraded the India's status. I don't exactly remember the status, but it is just a notch above the junk. I mean, when an economy is rated as a junk, then it is very likely that the institutional investors will take their money out of the country, and they don't show interest in the investing in that particular country, because when an economy is graded as junk, that means that the economy will have very high difficulty in paying off the debts, in paying off the money to the people. So that is what the junk thing means. So generally, how do the rating agencies award these ratings? It is based on some macroeconomic indicators. Two such indicators are, one is fiscal deficit, the second thing is debt to GDP ratio. When these two things are not within the stipulated limits, then the rating agencies will downgrade the rating of the particular country. So in that context, if government disperses too much money into the market, it releases too much money into the market by borrowing it from somewhere else, then definitely if government is borrowing, then the debt is increasing. Since the economy is under recession, the GDP is not growing. So as a result, debt to GDP ratio is growing. When the debt to GDP ratio grows, already we are just above the junk category. If the debt to GDP ratio increases, we will be pushed to junk category. Since if we are pushed to junk category, then we will not get adequate investments, because of, and also the existing institutional investors will take out the money from India, and that will result in depreciation of the rupee, because when people are taking out money from Indian market, then the demand for the rupee will come down. Once the demand for the rupee comes down, rupee depreciation will start. If the rupee depreciation starts and people take out the money, then the foreign reserves will come down. When the foreign reserves come down, we will not have enough money to pay for oil and the other imports. So it will lead to balance of payments crisis like we experienced in 1991. So by keeping all these things in mind, government is very cautious in dispersing money directly to the people by borrowing. So if that is the case, then what is the way out? Then this article is written by one IIM professor. He says that monetization of debt is the right way of reviving economy at this juncture. Many people think that monetization of debt means we will print the notes to bridge the gap required. I mean, if I require 100 crores, if the government requires 100 crores, then the government simply by printing the notes, it will fulfill the needs. That is how people think as soon as you say monetization of debt. But the professor is saying that monetization of debt doesn't mean exactly printing of the notes. So he is saying that monetization of debt means in the central bank balance sheet, you will just show that this much money has been added. So it can be just an electronic entry, because now it is a cashless economy. You need not print the notes and other stuff. So the point is you just have to introduce an entry in an electronic account. So then what happens is, once you introduce money in such a fashion through monetization, then you can revive the economy by introducing the demand. For example, making money available with people because of the cashless transactions. Now that money will be percolated through banks to other people, or government can take that money to disperse to the people. So what happens? What happens here is, once since you are not borrowing the money, you are just monetizing the debt. You are not borrowing. Since you are not borrowing, your debt to GDP ratio will not increase. Since debt to GDP ratio is not increasing, then the rating agency will not downgrade your rating. When the rating agencies don't downgrade your rating, then there is no threat of foreign capital moving out of the country. So that is why we have to revive the demand through monetization, not through borrowing. That is what the professor is arguing. But the counter argument that can come up here is, people may argue that it may lead to inflation, but in the present scenario we need not worry about the inflation, because already there is very low demand in the market. The demand is not high enough to cause inflation because of this monetization. So the way out is monetization of deficit as long as inflation is kept under control. How do you know the inflation is kept under control? If you read your basic macroeconomic textbook of NCERT, go back and read. If you don't understand what I am saying, you will understand. If you spend some time, you will understand. For example, if the current output is less than the potential output, then it is called the output gap is negative. That is an indicative of weak demand. But sorry, when the actual output is yes, correct. I am correct only. What I told is correct only. When the potential output is more than the actual output, that shows that there is less demand in the market. So then the output gap is negative. In that case, you can go for the monetization of deficit. But the point is, as soon as the gap is getting narrowed down, you should act quickly so that the inflation will not go out of control. That is the only thing government has to take care. So I think you have understood. You please go through your macroeconomic textbook once, NCERTs, then you will understand better. Thank you.